Yeah. Getting late. It's been a beautiful day. Now, it's late. Getting in, getting home. Had a good walk home. Cut through Kelso Park. It was quite fun, quite enjoyable, quite peaceful. It's late November, though, and there should be the beginnings of ice forming on the bay, and there isn't. A little bit perplexing, really. It's not that I don't enjoy the beautiful weather we're having. It is. It's wonderful. I love it. But what else is there that's coming with it? That's the question. We are messing up the climate. And that gives me cause for great concern. At the end of the day, we depend on the Earth. The Earth doesn't need us, but we need the Earth. And we've done a lot of damage to the Earth. We've done a lot of harm to our environment. We have, in fact, pretty much devastated our environment, with dire consequences for ourselves and for most species on Earth. We've done a lot of unnecessary and, I think, irreparable harm. And now we're going full tilt, full speed ahead. And it is, as David Suzuki said, a car hurtling towards a brick wall. And everybody's fighting over who gets to sit in the front seat. But we're all hurtling towards the same brick wall. And it doesn't matter who's in the front seat. We need to stop. We need to turn. We need to do something so that when we hit that disaster, that total ecological collapse, we'll be ready for it. And right now, we're not ready. And the COVID has shown us that we're not ready. The COVID has exposed some deep flaws in our corporate capitalist system of democracy, with its emphasis upon maximizing profit at the expense of the well-being of the proletariat. An ideology that is contrary to the nature of humanity. Humans were never meant to think in terms of every man for himself. We were never meant to be selfish, greedy pricks. Our ancestors cooperated, worked together, developed teamwork, developed strategies that involved everybody getting enough. But now, corporate capitalist democracy doesn't do that. Instead, it depends upon outside socialist organizations to pick up the slack. And when you're dealing with populations of tens and hundreds of millions, you need socialist institutions, because churches can't carry that. Doesn't matter how much you donate to the church, you're never going to be able to donate enough to both support the lavish lifestyles of the clergy and at the same time feed the poor. It's just not going to happen. And we've privatized everything to death. So there's literally no patch of dirt left where a person who doesn't have a lot of money can go and set up and build a life for themselves. Squatters' rights no longer exists. Instead, it gets reinterpreted by legislators as some guy in a tent setting up in your front yard and pooping on your front step. But that's not squatters' rights. Squatters' rights depends on the property being actually abandoned. Nobody lives there. Nobody pays taxes on it. And you can't just set up a tent. You actually have to grow crops. You have to grow crops, sell crops, and you have to pay taxes. You have to start paying taxes on the land. And then you get squatters' rights. But of course, that gets ignored, because in our court system, it's always portrayed as setting up a tent in somebody's front yard and pooping on their front step, which is not squatters' rights at all. but it is useful for justifying our condition of keeping all land privately owned, no matter what. And it's a useful tool for keeping the poor from having a foundation to start from. Because anybody can start from nothing if they've got a patch of dirt. But if you turn that patch of dirt into a commodity, you've increased its price and decreased its availability. And that's not good. That's not good at all. That's bad. Because it means that people who have nothing become increasingly desperate, angry, and frustrated. And sooner or later, they're going to lash out. And right now, people are lashing out in ones and twos. And occasionally at a protest, police are able to provoke maybe 10 or 12 people into lashing back. But what happens when it's 1,000 people lashing out? And what happens when it's not completely spontaneous, when it's not provoked by an act of police violence? What happens when the protest doesn't just have a few sparks of resistance, but is an organized act of resistance? Well, police die in droves. And then bankers die, and investors die. All the corporate tycoons die in droves. And then we, the proletariat, start dragging politicians out as well. And they die in droves. And that's what's going to happen eventually, the way things are going. The people will simply become so desperate, so hungry, and so frustrated that we will feel that we have no choice but to take up arms as a matter of basic survival. And, well, you don't want that. You don't want that. You might think you want that, but you don't. When you provoke the proletariat, eventually the proletariat fight back. That's inevitable. And as I said, the COVID has exposed the intrinsic weaknesses of corporate capitalist democracy. Something to think about. People are cluing in. They're realizing that we've been lied to for generations. It's going to come back and bite you on the ass, I think. Yeah. It's going to come back and bite you on the ass.